And we're broadcasting?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Sorry. Press record broadcast and then play the video. No.
Run for Something launched with one goal: recruit and support young, diverse, progressive candidates who have the power to make a difference in their community.
It was my time to step up and run. I never thought I'd work in politics. I never thought I'd run for office, and I'm so proud and honored to have the support of our community.
3 years later, more than 1,000 candidates have shown us what it takes to lead, unafraid to speak up.
When it comes to personal decisions around someone's pregnancy, we should support them, we should honor them, we should love them, and we should make sure that conversation is between themselves, their chosen family, their doctor, and their God.
Unafraid to take on a challenge. Despite overwhelming odds, they've led the charge on climate change.
The Green New Deal truly came out of my conversations in rural Maine. It's about economic and job opportunity for our state.
On healthcare.
This issue is dire and people are dying right now because of these price increases. So yeah, we need an investigation.
Picking up the torch of women and LGBTQ trailblazers before us.
No child in the Commonwealth of Virginia and no person in the Commonwealth of Virginia should ever be afraid to be who they are.
And changing the face of our democracy, one election at a time. They're just getting started, and so are we. Run for Something is here to stay. Go to runforsomething.net to learn how you can join us.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Littman. I'm one of the co-founders and the executive director of Run for Something. I am so excited to be here for our first front row seat encore event. This is the first time we're doing one of these outside of a week-long series, our first one during the middle of the day, our first one on a May day, I guess. And I'm really excited about it because we're gonna have a really good conversation. Before we get into a really honest and I hope candid conversation about parenting during governing and legislating and what it's like right now, a few small housekeeping things. As folks are joining, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. It is down. If you put on the little bottom, there's a button that says chat. The chat window will pop up. Make sure to introduce yourself and change your settings to all panelists and attendees so everybody could see. Ross will be in there to drop links to things and to spur the conversation along. And we've got a great group of people here. I can already see a bunch of the names I recognize and many more I don't. So please feel free to introduce yourself. Second, if you have questions for any of our panelists while we're talking, please use the Q&A function. That's to make sure that I see it and I'm able to ask them directly and it doesn't get lost in the chat box. So questions directly for candidates, to use the Q&A, chat to talk with other participants here. Third, for those of you who are new to the Run for Something community, I want to give you a very, very quick overview of what Run for Something is up to right now and what we've been doing over the last 3 years. Run for Something was created in 2017 to recruit and support young, diverse progressives running for local office. Since launching in January 2017, we've identified we are just one person short today of 51,000 young people across the country who want to run. We've endorsed 1,056, and we have elected 309 across 45 states plus DC. Our winners are 55% women, 48% people of color, 18% LGBTQ. They are incredible people. They are leading in their communities when we need them to lead the most. We've worked with people like Representative Ana Escamani in Florida, who is fighting with landlords for off-campus apartments to make sure they're not charging students rent. We worked with Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo in Texas, who is single-handedly saving lives in Texas while the lieutenant governor is trying to tell seniors to sacrifice themselves for the economy. She is the one issuing the shelter-at-home order. She is the one who just pushed through funding to send every voter in Harris County ballots for November and July elections. And we're working with people like Danica Rome in Virginia, one of the delegates in the House of Delegates there, who took on the USDA and won to ensure that students and kids don't have to show up in person to get the free lunches that they're eligible for, helping them stay home and stay safe and save lives. We're really excited about what we're doing right now, which is ensuring that the candidates we're working with have the resources they need to succeed. The best place to go for all of that, if you're a candidate on the line tonight, or today, is resourcesforcampaigns.com. That's our hub for materials and information. As you're looking to retool your campaign, how do you do this virtually? How do you run this in this new environment where you can't go out in person, you can't knock doors, you can't collect signatures necessarily the way that we used to. But it is a new world, and we're working to figure it out together, and our candidates and elected officials who are doing so are the ones leading. We're gonna have a really good conversation today about what it's like to legislate, while also parenting, something that, you know, I don't have kids. I have so much admiration for those that do, whether or not they're in elected office, because this seems so fucking hard right now. We're gonna hear from a couple folks who are doing just that, are leading in public service while also taking care of kids at home. I am really excited to bring up a couple of our panelists today. You're gonna hear from State Senator Jessica Ramos, from Kansas State Representative Rhee Shue, from Kentucky State Representative Josie Raymond, and New York State Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. I'm going to ask each of these folks to introduce themselves just a little bit with your name, your credentials, where you are, what your quarantine situation is like, and what's keeping you busy. I know Senator Gillibrand is running just a couple minutes late, so we're gonna start with you, Senator Ramos.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Ramos. I'm a New York State Senator representing District 13 here in Queens. We are incidentally at the epicenter of the pandemic here, where we have had more deaths than really anywhere in the country, possibly the world, unfortunately. It's been very hard to deal with everything that our neighbors are going through, because of course this began as a medical emergency, but as time goes on, it's really, the economic crisis is really becoming apparent. People who don't necessarily have access to fresh food, or people who don't have money to pay rent or medicine. And in that sense, it's been really, really hard. But nevertheless, thank you for having me, because I think it's important as more progressive candidates are recruited, that we think about how it is that we do juggle parenthood, which is, you know, the most important title that we could ever have. And I do it in a very untraditional way, because I'm separated and I share custody of my boys. And unfortunately, the state legislature's schedule mirrors largely the school schedule, meaning that for many weeks at a time, I'm missing out on the day-to-day academics for my boys who are 6 and 8. And that is a very painful thing to deal with. And I deal with a lot of guilt. And at the same time, you know, I try to remember that what I'm doing is, you know, of course, not only for them, but for everyone. And because I really do believe that this is the best possible way that I can fight for a better education for them. So I think there's room for every type of parent. I think that historically we have seen in you know, the perfect husband and the perfect wife, perhaps, and especially for conservatives, this idea of, you know, the traditional family and family values. Whereas I think for progressives, we know that values are what make the person. And it is all about what you stand for, and life happens, and nobody's perfect, and we're all figuring it out, and we're trying to help each other as best as we can during this pandemic. Just trying to do both of my jobs.
Thank you. Representative Shue in Kansas, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your quarantine situation is like?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Rhee Shue. I represent District 25 in Kansas, which is just on the other side of the state line from Kansas City, Missouri, which is getting hit pretty hard, not nearly as hard as New York, obviously. So basically the legislature has been out of session since mid-March or so. We kind of saw the numbers piling up and thought it was best just to pass a bare bones budget, which is the only thing that we're constitutionally required to do, and then go home. So I've been very lucky, consider myself very lucky that I've been able to spend, you know, these past 6 weeks with Astra here, who's a little fussy. but she's 6 months old. And, you know, just trying to raise her mostly. So my wife is a labor and delivery nurse on nights. And so it's really important right now that she's on the top of her game, right, with everything going on. So during the days, it's Kirsha's sleeping, and then I'm essentially raising Astra full time. And then trying to do my constituent services as best as I can. Here in Kansas, we run very lean and we don't have staff. So really constituent services is all about me answering phone calls and answering emails. So our Department of Labor has been underfunded for decades. I don't know if you've heard about Sam Brownback's austerity measures or not, but we're still run on COBOL, the coding language, which is literally decades old. So really it's been helping my constituents try to manage that and get the unemployment benefits that they're due.
She is so unbearably cute. Oh, I love her so much.
She's better than I do, which I'm pretty jealous of.
Representative Raymond, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your quarantine situation is like. Hold on, I think you gotta unmute yourself. There you go.
Can you not hear me? I'm sorry. Okay. I said I'm going to go get my baby for show and tell. But I'm Josie Raymond. I'm a state representative in Kentucky. I represent our 31st district, which is part of Louisville. Everything that Ree was saying about Kansas describes Kentucky as well. Louisville is this very progressive city and a very conservative state. So, you know, people in urban centers across the country know the dynamic that we're facing here. I was elected in 2018. With a ton of Run for Something support. I'm unopposed in 2020. I win. We here in Louisville are mourning the Kentucky Derby, which was supposed to be run last Saturday. People celebrated as best they could, and we're hopeful that that can go on in September. I have been at home homeschooling my 6-year-old kindergartner and my 4-year-old pre-K kid. And then I've got a new little girl who was born in January. She was born in the middle of our legislative session here in Kentucky. I was the first woman to give birth while serving in the Kentucky State House, which feels really good to be that historic first. But in reality, you know, it's hard as hell to figure out how you navigate that. And so this was my maternity leave. This is my first ever paid maternity leave, which is an incredible privilege. And I thought that the baby and I would be wandering around Target. And instead we're trapped here at home with the big kids. So, we don't have staff either in Kentucky. So I'm trying to make do as best I can for my constituents who are, for the most part, seeking unemployment benefits. And word has gotten out that I answer every phone call. And so now I'm receiving calls from across the state, you know, from folks who don't hear back from their representative, but I'm happy to take those.
That's amazing. And how old are your older children?
6 and 4.
6 and 4 and a newborn. Whoa. And Senator Gillibrand, are you there? Let's see if she was able to join.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. We're just having folks introduce themselves. Tell us a little what your quarantine situation is like and what you're focused on right now.
Well, thank you very much for hosting this and for bringing this community together. I think it's really important during this time because people feel extremely isolated and feel powerless to change their life or their world. And so I found that Zoom calls and these kind of meetings have been invaluable to me personally, so I could stay connected to people who are focused on the same goals I am focused on, but also to, you know, really recognize that we will get through this together. And so I'm grateful that you hosted this call today. I loved hearing from the other candidates and their balance. My balance is similar. My children are older. Theo is 16, Henry is 11. But I was scurrying to get the mascara off my face before I got onto this Zoom call because for some reason I thought it was at 1:30 and I was in the middle of making lunch when Nick calls me at 1 and I said, oh my God. So quickly fixing makeup, shoving lunch in my face, and baking food for the boys all within the 5 minutes right before this call. So your time, I think, working from home and being surrounded by your kids, you lose sight of your work life. And I think that's what every person is experiencing right now who's working from home. Because, like, you know, I don't separate my days anymore. So, you know, the hour before this call, I swept my entire house floor. So I made, because the kids are there and just bringing in dirt all day long. It's just unbelievable. So I'm sweeping my floor, trying to make lunch. I just taught Henry how to make his favorite lunch, which is cheesy pasta. He knows how to make mac and cheese, which comes in a box. He can do that, and he can do the frozen mac and cheese. But cheesy pasta is different. You gotta boil your pasta and then add milk, butter, and cheese. So it's like mac and cheese, but it's all fresh ingredients. And so he's doing it right now by himself. So if there's a clamor in the kitchen, I may have to run. But so it is the era of multitasking, I think, for any parent that's trying to work from home. My kids do their schooling in the morning. So basically 9 to 11 is their in-class time. And then sometimes they'll have working group meetings in the afternoon. So just managing them and keeping them focused on target, you know, not getting too into themselves or too anxious. But I think anxiety is high. I think fear is high. And what we can do as mothers and fathers, but also as leaders and advocates, is let people know they're not alone and we are in this together and we will get through it.
Cheesy pasta sounds
better
than I can cook. So
very delicious.
I want to remind folks from home that if you're listening in and you have questions, to put them in the Q&A and to introduce yourself in the chat using all panelists and attendees as your setting to make sure everyone can see. Senator Gillibrand, you touched on something that I'm wondering if you and Representative Raymond could touch on, of as your kids are doing distance learning, in particular, and just Senator Ramos as well, challenges and successes that you've discovered over the last 2 months? I'll start with you, Senator.
Yeah, so the challenge is the obvious, keeping your kids focused on school and not letting them feel like it's not really school, that they don't have to do it. So the 16-year-old, much easier. He takes his studies seriously, he gets it done. He's an introvert, so being online and being in his room all day long was great for him. He's super happy, super contented. The 11-year-old Henry is an extrovert and he needs his friends badly. So he's online all day just chatting with them and like playing games with them. And if you try to take him offline, he goes through withdrawal because he wants to be with his friends. So he's struggling much more. I think my success was that Theo has really done well, and he just got his midterm grades back and he did very, very well on them. So I was really pleased that he managed to keep his studies up. Henry, our biggest failure, he won't go to gym class. He's like, Mom, I'm not going to gym. It's not mandatory. I'm not going. I'm the one who put gym on the schedule. I texted the teacher and said, can we please get gym on the schedule? Like, this kid needs to run around and do something. Like, I'm doing Zoom yoga. Can you please do something for these kids? And so we get gym on the schedule. Now he won't participate. So that's my biggest failure. Can't get Henry to do non-mandatory activities.
Representative Raymond?
So my children are much smaller, right? It's 6 and 4 and the baby. So I'm juggling the baby while I'm trying to educate, enrich the bigger kids. I used to teach 7th and 8th grade. I was a teacher with Teach for America in Indianapolis public schools. So I thought, oh, I can do this. I'm completely prepared for this. Not at all. When it's your own kids, it's totally different. Our school district had to hurry and gather and put together a distance learning plan. It didn't exist here in Jefferson County Public Schools in Louisville, Kentucky. We've got 100,000 kids, over 60,000 of them qualify for free and reduced lunch, 6,000 of them are homeless. And so our district was so focused on how do we do this equitably that the plan didn't exist yet. So while they were putting it together, I was making do. Now we're doing the school district's plan, which I so appreciate, but they've got my kindergartner on 10 apps. And this is a kid who didn't have a device. So I keep reminding myself that life skills are also really important, right? Measuring for recipes, doing the laundry, cleaning the house, caring for your brother and sister. These are also things that our kids need to learn. And then thank goodness that reading real books is still the most important thing for a child's education. And I'm reminding my daughter that reading in the closet is a different activity than reading in the bathtub, which is a different activity than reading in the on the couch. And so we just rotate.
That's so fun. Senator Ramos, I know your kids are in with their father during the week, but have you done any distance learning during the weekends? How have you managed that?
Well, more than that, what I was going to say, I identify with some of those points that have already been made, but largely I find myself really thinking about meal planning a lot more than I used to, because I have to think about work and be on the phone and be on email and be on Zooms and figure out how I'm juggling that time with, having to take care of the boys. just this weekend, we did a food distribution from my district office. And I didn't bring the boys because I, didn't want to have to put that burden, obviously, on anybody else. And I can't watch them. They're 6 and 8. They're going to run around, maybe get really close to people. So I had to leave them with my mom, so figuring out, when it is for food to be ready, making sure that they're growing boys. That has been quite a challenge in ways that weren't before. But I see that they seem more relaxed and happy. They just miss their friends a lot. And those are conversations that we've had to have, and trying to figure out what friends they can FaceTime with, because they have the ability to do that. We live in an apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens, so also outside space is very limited. We have a courtyard, but if we hear that there's a lot of people in the courtyard, we can't go use it, because of social distancing. And so that can become a challenge, especially with 2 rambunctious boys who want to jump all over the place with their Nerf guns and, and play around. So that's kind of been the experience so far.
I want to toss this next question to Representative Hsu and then others if you have thoughts. There's been a lot of conversation about how one of the things the pandemic is changing is sort of gender roles within the home, or traditional gender roles. You mentioned that your wife works at night as a labor and delivery nurse. How do you feel like this moment has changed, at least in your home, but more broadly across families?
I would hope that we see more involved fathers, especially of newborns. Certainly, I consider, like I said, myself really lucky that I get to spend so much time with my newborn, whereas most fathers don't get that opportunity in the country, and that's something that we certainly need to look at addressing. But kind of gender roles, like our relationship has never really worked like that. I've always cooked more. We share laundry. She's always made more money than me. And so that's not something that we really worried about. And so when the pandemic hit and all of a sudden, I was spending a lot more time at home, it was just natural, just what works for us, right? And we never thought of, the man does this and the woman does that. It's just, we have a life and this is the direction that our life has taken. And then we just make it work, like the right puzzle piece for our family.
Others have thoughts on this?
So I have boys and a husband, and so I'm working on making them good partners. So I've taught my children how to do pretty much every aspect of cleaning in the last month. Henry likes the Swiffer. He likes spraying. The dog does not like the Swiffer, so we have to walk the dog during swiffing. Theo prefers vacuuming. Nobody likes bathrooms, so I make my husband do that, and he's agreed. And my job is generally the floors, just sweeping, as I mentioned today. I do the dishes, I do the cooking, but if I've cooked dinner, someone else does the dishes. And so they take care of the dishes after dinner. I've taught the boys how to cook. So Henry, as I mentioned, is right now doing his cheesy pasta on his own, which is pretty amazing. Theo, I've taught him how to make some major dishes, some Moroccan chicken, some chicken teriyaki. They've learned how to make shepherd's pie, which is a British dish. I do it for my husband. What else have they learned how to do? They know how to do steak and potatoes, so basics. So I've been trying to do Home Ec 101 for both boys, and it's working. And I'm lucky that Jonathan is very supportive, and he helps a little bit every day on all activities, which makes a huge difference. And he does the manly tasks of garbage and clean up after dinner. So those are his 2 big ones. I try to do laundry because he does it so poorly. But other than that, we're just making do, figuring it out, trying our best, and hopefully my boys will grow up to be supportive spouses.
I wanted to ask a little bit about how you guys as parents are creating space for yourselves. You have jobs as legislators, you have jobs as parenting. How are you trying to find time to take care of yourself? Representative Raymond, do you want to start?
Self-care at my house is more like self-preservation. right? Like, you know, I'm not taking walks for exercise. I'm taking walks for escape or for time to get on the phone or for time to think. You know, I'm not eating better so I'll, you know, get in great shape. I'm just eating what's here at the house, so I can keep up with everybody. So no, I mean, lack of self-care was a problem for me before. And so like everyone else that's trapped who thinks, oh, this is, you know, the time that I'm going to start knitting and turn everything around. It's not, right? We find ways to work. And then the children will, of course, suck every minute that they possibly can. And so I'm experiencing that. Back to the gender piece, I have an incredible husband. And so we split stuff as best we can, but I sort of took health and education before this. And so here we are. What are we focused on right now? It's health and education. And so, but we're both sort of hyper cognizant about making sure that we have an equitable partnership. And so I think several times a week we'll catch each other and be like, am I doing this because it just needs to be done and I'm doing it and I happen to be a woman? You know, I'm not doing this because I'm the mom, right? And so we're just trying to balance like everybody.
Senator Ramos?
Yeah, hi. I've also historically had a very difficult relationship with self-care. And as of late, actually, I have made it a personal goal during this quarantine to actually hopefully perfect a solid morning routine that does not only, you know, of course, I put on my face for work, and I know many people see makeup as a self-care thing. I personally do not every day, especially depending on how I'm feeling about myself that day, right? But I'm trying to carve out time to work out, or even at the very least stretch. Can't do an hour, then it's 30 minutes. Not going to work out for 30 minutes, then maybe it's just stretching out 4 or 5, 10 minutes. But, you know, making sure I'm moving my body in some way, and that I'm kind of taking a mindful assessment of where I am and how I'm feeling, so that hopefully I'm a lot more conscientious of others, and not only in how I communicate throughout the day, but how I make my decisions throughout the day, right? So I think that so far so good. I'm happy to report over the last 2 weeks. And hopefully I can figure out how this can be sustainable during legislative session and, you know, when things restart again.
Yeah, if I can jump in. For me, I think a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of realized there's really only like 4 things that I like have to do in my life to keep centered. You know, public service is definitely one of those. Cooking, fitness, playing music. I play piano. And then as long as I kind of always do those 4 things, everything else can be crazy, but I still feel pretty centered. I think this goes back to, like, I can't take care of other people if I don't take care of myself. And so, you know, the quarantine actually has been not affected those 4 things at all, right? Like, I'm still doing public service from home. I still have a home gym. I can do all of those things. So I feel like I'm in a good spot there. And so it's been great. Part of me has been trying to refine my culture during the quarantine, actually. Cooking is obviously a big part of that. So I've tried to find just Chinese recipes that I remember my mom making, and then going out to the Chinese food store once every 3 weeks and just picking up some things and then learning how to cook those. So it's been really good to try to like refine my Chinese-ness during all of this.
That's amazing. Senator Gillibrand, keeping your sanity.
Yeah, so this is something that's not COVID related. I decided probably 5 years ago that you have to build the life you want, and you just have to start making changes. And so I started really making exercise part of my daily life as the one thing I do for myself. So the first hour of the day, whenever that day starts, is mine. And I'll either do a biking class or a yoga class or a Pilates class. That was a lot more fun pre-COVID because I'd always see my girlfriends during those activities, which was great. And so during COVID, what I'm doing is we will all participate in the same Zoom class. We'll say, how about, you know, Pilates 7 a.m. tomorrow? And we're like, yeah. So we Zoom in and do it. We all actually got a chance to rent bikes from our local gym because none of us owned bikes. So we rented those stationary bikes. And so you can do Peloton free for the first 3 months. So we rented our bikes for 99 bucks a month, and we'll just push play on a Peloton class at the same time. And so we rotate who gets to pick the class, and then we just push play. So we did that this morning. And then the other thing I do for mental health and physical health is go to bed early. And this is a little bit of a challenge because my boys do not want to go to bed early. So I've given up during COVID putting them to bed. And this was something I just had to accept because they want to stay up till 10 or 11 or 12 or 1. Like they really stay up very late for whatever reason. This just seems the free for all for tweens and teenagers to stay up forever. And I try to be asleep by 10. So I've just resolved I'm not going to be able to tuck Henry in anymore. And he's going to have to put himself to bed, which he's the one who's insisting he stays up till 11. So whatever. But I need to go to bed because I need sleep. And that's the only thing that keeps me sane and steady. And so those are the two things I do for myself every day. And I agree with the Congresswoman that I definitely don't like makeup. It's like a pain in my butt. But I'm happy to do it for a Zoom call because it's, I guess, part of the job.
I will admit, I've committed to no makeup during the pandemic, so.
Love it. I love it. I love it.
Can't drag myself into it.
This is the first time I've worn non-stretchy clothes in like 5 weeks, so this has been very, very good for that.
Oh man, I was gonna say I'm very impressed by your suit, and all of you look very put together. I'm in my t-shirt today. So I am curious, each of you, for much of your campaigns, being a parent has informed your legislative priorities. What do you think is not being discussed enough right now in terms of how we can help parents both during and after this crisis? Or what do you want to keep discussing? Yeah, Senator, go ahead.
One of the things is the digital divide. There is such a gaping between haves and have-nots in society and in education specifically. And one thing this COVID crisis has done is put a very fine point on the lack of access to computers, Wi-Fi, digital content. And so, we've been helping lots of constituents around the state, but I have to say, if you're a homeless youth or in foster care or low income, your access to computers is hard. You might not have access. And so we've been trying to rectify that over the last month by getting tablets into the hands of kids who don't have them. I even had a woman who was living in a homeless shelter with 3 girls and trying to educate your kids when you don't even have a home. Those are the real challenges of New Yorkers right now. And so homelessness, food insecurity, digital divide, the fact that overwhelmingly people of color are bearing the burden of this pandemic. More often than not, they tend to be our first responders, our frontline workers, our grocery store clerks, our pharmacy clerks, nurses, EMTs, first responders, and their children, because a lot of these jobs are so low paid, they might not have access to the basic tools of being able to be schooled at home. So I think this crisis has revealed the underbelly of the economy, that we need a fair economy, we need higher wages, we need universal sick days, we need national paid leave, we need a safety net for everyone, and we need to reward people who work hard every day, particularly in these critical industries. And so hopefully in COVID-4, we'll have a heroes fund to give everybody time and a half, on average a $13 increase for every hour worked retroactively.
Others?
Yeah, I think for across the country, but we're seeing it especially clearly here in Kentucky. Our reopen plan, right, has businesses beginning to reopen later in May on a staggered schedule, and the conversation about opening childcare centers is not even on the table, right? It's June or later, and I feel like I'm crazy running around screaming. If people do not have safe places to put their children, they cannot go to work. I'm so frustrated that in our society, how your children are cared for when you show up at work is supposed to be invisible. It's like a secret. Nobody wants to hear about it. They don't want you to come into work and be like, oh, I had to do this and drop so-and-so and do that. And it's like, okay, lady, okay, guy, we don't need to hear it. But now we're seeing you can't ask people to show up to work without anywhere to put their children, particularly when the grandparents that so many people rely on are unavailable. So to not have a plan that coordinates workplaces and childcare doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and just in general, something that has really come to light through all this is how much people rely on schools for both meals and childcare, right? We're having the same conversations in Kansas. We're not opening up summer schools, which a lot of parents use in summer as childcare, but we're reopening the economy. So again, what do we do there? That's something that I think we need to have a bigger conversation about. Something that's kind of off the beaten path on this question for me, I've been thinking about this a lot ever since having a baby, obviously. And for me, I always think back to my cultural roots, right? In so many different cultures, people are just used to living in multi-generational homes, right? And in America, we have this aversion to it, myself included. First thing I did when I turned 18 was get as far away from my parents as possible. Went to school out in Los Angeles. But, you know, those are kind of natural child caretakers that, you know, we haven't really caught up in terms of public policy to deal with this new paradigm of the grandparents not living in the same home. So there's no, you know, that's not a policy fix. That's a cultural prioritization, but that we need, our policy needs to catch up to that fact.
Senator Ramos?
Yeah, hi. So I would say I have a few answers to this. I think in general, one of the bigger things that I'm personally working on, and I would say that it's informed by my being a parent and wanting to provide for my family, for my boys, is that there are actually a lot of people who don't qualify for the wage assistance programs that are available at the federal and state level. So aside from being a mom and being state senator, I chair the labor committee in the New York State Senate and spend a lot of time thinking about how it is that we can make the system service New Yorkers better during the pandemic. I mean, I think much like I'm sorry, the other legislator, Sue, he, you know, the Department of Labor has been using coding language and a system that is completely antiquated, decades old, and they have an inability to deal with the capacity. They're completely overwhelmed by the number of New Yorkers who are out of work. And that's only those who actually qualify for unemployment insurance or the pandemic unemployment assistance program, even though that's not even, we don't even have a full picture of that here in New York quite yet from the feds. You know, we have, especially in communities like mine, we have big undocumented populations. And the fact of the matter is that they're the backbone of our economy. They're many of our essential workers, especially as restaurant workers and delivery workers and grocery store workers. And they too need either hazard pay as they're, if they're still working, and if not, well, they're still going to need to pay rent and buy food. And if they don't qualify for unemployment insurance, well, that's quite a problem. Especially, you know, I have tens of thousands of people living that experience right now. And so I worry for those parents, and I saw many families with their children online asking, you know, for food help at my office. And that's been something to really contend with. I mean, I think about it every night, you know, before I go to bed, trying to figure out new and creative ways that I can help people be able to put food on the table. I passed the paid sick leave law at the beginning of the pandemic to help people who have employers who are actual workers, regardless of whether they have documentation or not, and that helped a little bit. But look, ultimately, I think this pandemic is really forcing us to contend with the bigger questions about how it is that we purport a government and a society that actually does recognize the humanity in everybody, and where we're all helping each other. And you know, I hope, and this is why I never say, you know, when we go back to normal. I don't want to go back to normal. I want to make sure that whenever we restart, we're doing it in a better way.
I think that's such a good point. Senators Jill Brandon Ramos and Representative Raymond, I'm curious, how are you talking to your kids about this? And how are you managing their expectations for all the things we can't plan for, you know, for the summer and the fall? How are you communicating that?
So with my boys, we've just been having very direct conversations of not knowing what the future looks like. Recognizing that camp is most likely canceled, recognizing that we may still be in COVID response time, meaning social distancing, not a lot of time to see other children. So we're just trying to set their expectations that this may continue till September. Both children are hopeful that they'll be able to go to school in the fall, as I am, as every parent in America is, I can promise you that. I think the world is really hoping that we figure this out, because no one really is that good at homeschooling unless they are a professional teacher. The rest of us now have a great devotion to our teachers, and I hope their pay gets increased by 3 times. So we're hoping by September things are back to normal as close as possible, but we're going to have COVID for a while. It's going to be with us, and as a legislator, I'm really just trying to make sure we have the resources going to the community where it's needed, to our healthcare centers and hospitals and first responders and people who have no income. So we are working on it, and my kids have set their expectations to not expect anything and to hope that we can go back to school in the fall.
Yeah, we're being as clear as we can with the 4-year-old and the 6-year-old, and they really understand quite a bit. Like I said earlier, they're so young, they're not missing their friends or their teachers too much, which we're thankful for. This is their new normal. Now we've been home 8 weeks or so, and in their life, that's quite a stretch. So this is their new normal. On Easter, my 4-year-old made a sign that said "Boo Coronavirus," and we hung it by the dinner table, and we've decided it will remain until they're able to get back out and do some of the things that they're missing. But you know, it's funny, they'll be totally different kids. They grow so fast, they'll be totally different kids by the time they see their friends or get to go to camp or you know, enter 1st grade from kindergarten. But what's helped is the leadership of our governor too. We've got a Democratic governor named Andy Beshear in Kentucky, and he does a daily 5 o'clock briefing, and often he'll do a children's special along with it. And that's been really helpful for families here.
That's amazing. Senator Ramos?
Sorry, I thought I was muted. You know, it's been quite an experience. I mean, our governor has had very famous briefings daily throughout this crisis. I mean, we even saw him, you know, get into a little skit with his brother often. And I think for the most part has shown just how tough New York can be when we pull together. And I think that in that way, he has certainly helped us keep our morale up. But nevertheless, I mean, we have just had so many deaths, and there is so much need, because we are the state in the country that has the greatest income inequality, that really what we want to do is make sure that the legislature goes back to work and takes action and is able to pass so many bills to help so many people. I have a worker bailout bill to precisely help the people who don't qualify for wage assistance programs, for example. And I won't get into, you know, all of that, but nevertheless, I mean, I think that when it comes to the kids, I really am very honest with them, and I tell them exactly what's going on. I want them to know exactly how it is. You know, at the beginning, teaching them how to wash their hands properly, right? We watched a video, making sure that we clean underneath our nails and that sort of thing, because I want them to be as informed as possible and know how to do things correctly, how to take care of themselves. We have been planning to, since last year, go to Colombia, at where my parents are from, at the end of August with my boyfriend. And I don't know if that's going to be possible given, you know, COVID, whether, you know, it's worth buying tickets, you know, because they're so cheap right now. Is that, you know, so I'm trying to manage their expectations because they've never been, but that's something that they had been looking forward to for such a long time. And if it doesn't end up working out, I'm going to be very, very sad for them. But there's always next year, I suppose.
God willing, you know.
Astro's working really hard on Mama, if you guys were wondering.
I love that little baby. I want to do a little bit backwards looking, but because I know we have a couple candidates or potential candidates on the call today who are parents thinking about running for office or currently running for office. And Representative Raymond, I want to start with you because you had a really interesting experience your first campaign out of managing parenting, if I recall correctly. So can you tell a little bit about that and also just any advice for parents who are currently campaigning or thinking about running for office themselves?
I mean, it's so challenging, right? My advice is not helpful, which is like marry my husband and have my boss. You know, you need really supportive people around you, or it's nearly impossible, right? So when I first started running, my daughter was 3, my son was 1. What's sort of regenerative through the process is how much it means to other people to see it. You know, we'd be at an event and they'd be crying and I'd be juggling and I'd think, well, that was a nightmare. That was a disaster. I never should have taken them. And then you hear later someone say, I saw you doing that and it was so inspiring. I saw you and it was so powerful. And we're usually not in these spaces. So recognizing that, you know, you're not just campaigning on your behalf, but for so many others can be restorative when you're feeling really down. Something that we did in my campaign, we followed the lead of women across the country who requested with their local registries of election finance to use campaign funds on childcare expenses. We were following the lead of Gretchen Luba-Shirley, who ran in New York. And so we got approval to do that here in Kentucky. But what was so interesting when I was requesting that decision from the state was that the woman who worked at our registry of election finance said, why do you even need to pay for childcare? Just take them with you. And I thought, I'm speaking to someone who doesn't have children, because, you know, I took my daughter door knocking one time and we got through 11 doors before she had to pee. So, so take them when you can, leave them when you can, use it to your advantage in terms of trying to take steps like that, getting approval like that, or get media attention where you can to show that you might be the first one doing this, but you're not going to be the last one.
Senator Gillibrand, you had a very different campaign trail with your children. Advice?
Well, my first campaign was 2006 when Theo was 3. And so that's when I tried to do the things that the representative just mentioned, you know, just trying to literally bring a child on your hip and look like you've got your shit together even mildly. That's very hard to do. So I did that a few times, but it was only a few times. We found activities where what Theo could enjoy didn't matter. So we took him to all the fairs because there's lots of county fairs. It was a house district of 10 counties. And so we'd spend the summer going to the county fairs, and Henry loved that. I mean, Theo loved that. And Johnny could go take Theo off on some rides while I did some, you know, town hall type events, and that worked. My second campaign, I was pregnant with Henry out to here. So that was a different campaign. I was tired a lot. Walking around being very pregnant is very hard. And so I had him in May, and then the second half of the campaign was just an infant and a toddler, you know, trying to do a few events here with both kids, just rare, but I did try to do it. And the best thing about having children as a candidate is it gives you a lens from which to understand how people's lives are deeply impacted by policy. When you're a mother, you know pretty darn quickly how important universal pre-K is. You know pretty quickly why paid leave is a basic safety net that every working parent should have access to. You know immediately why affordable daycare is a life or death issue, because you know exactly how much daycare is. And one of the problems with Congress is how affluent most of the members are. They often have a lot of money, lots of caregivers. They may have a spouse that does all caregiving for them. They may be quite remote when it comes to what it takes to raise children. And so I found when I got to Congress, my voice was needed because I was only the 6th woman to ever have a child in Congress. Most of my colleagues were much older. Most were male. Very few people had young children. And so they didn't live my life. And so I felt like I could be a voice for all those working parents in my district and around the country, just because I was sharing part of their life. And I had a job that was, you know, I had a lot of flexibility compared to most working people. They you know, they don't get to bring their kid to work. They don't get to take a day off if your kid's sick. So that's why things like universal sick days became so important to me, along with paid leave. A real awareness of how shitty would this be if I couldn't do A, B, or C. And that's the life most parents have to live. And it's hard. It's really hard. And so I can be a stronger advocate for more issues that were largely untouched before I got to Congress. Like to not even have a bill for national paid leave until 5 years ago when I proposed it with Rosa DeLauro. I mean, that's absurd to have, you know, not even a movement by Republicans to put universal sick days in the COVID bills. I mean, how freaking absurd is that? Especially when our frontline workers, like grocery store workers and pharmacists and EMTs, they have to go to work because they're the ones who are protecting us from going off a cliff. So I think it makes me a better legislator because I can empathize with other people's lives a lot easier because I'm living it, at least in some respects. And then for my presidential race, my kids are so capable by that point. Henry was 11 during most of it, and Theo was 16 during most of it. And Henry was the director of fun. And Henry, you know, created his own t-shirt, director of fun. And Henry got to plan the RV tour of Iowa. So like the kids, when they get older, they can really see themselves as part of the campaign and an instrumental part of the campaign. So, you know, depending on the kid, Theo doesn't want a minute in the spotlight. So he was like, no, I'll let Henry do that. So you've got to also as a parent recognize what your kids are willing to do and not willing to do and be very sensitive to that because you don't want to force your kid to do something they're not having fun. But Henry had a blast and I had a blast. And so, yeah, it's fun.
Anyone else with advice for parents who are candidates?
Yeah, so this will be my first campaign this year, campaigning with a baby, but just in general, do it. I can't express to you how under-indexed young parents are in legislatures across the country. The average age of the Kansas legislature is like 67, and I'm 31, and so I'm doing a good share of bringing down that average age. And so, you know, I don't know if it's malicious, but they just don't care about things like paid parental leave. They don't care about universal pre-K because it doesn't actively affect them. There are plenty of Republicans on the other side of the aisle who are younger who are like, oh no, we could get on board with that. And so just the age, the generational gap makes a big difference there. So we really need to hear your voice. And just kind of on a lighter note, I will say having a baby has opened like the doors with the Republicans a lot in the legislature. Like the Republicans that I'd never talked to before, there's 125 of us, there's just a lot. But once I had the baby, all of a sudden I had a bunch of people come and talk to me about how cute she is and blah, 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 blah. And so you have those conversations and you're like, well, how about paid parental leave? Where do you guys stand on that? So it's kind of allowed me to kind of open some doors and have conversations and advance the conversation because I'm sure Representative Raymond experiences this a lot as well, you know, being Democrats in red states. You know, I'm not going to get a bill with my name on it, right? Like it's just not going to happen. But I can advance conversations to encourage one of my friends on the other side of the aisle to, you know, lead the charge on a bill and make it happen. So that's what we're trying to do.
That's amazing. Okay, final question. Unless Senator Ramos, you have anything else to add?
No, we'll do the final question because I've unfortunately actually have to run pretty soon. So
you'll go first, Garrett. I just want to know what's bringing you joy, what's giving you hope, what's making you optimistic right now.
Well, I think we could all agree when we say that our kids always bring us hope. I mean, you know, having that little piece of you out there, you know, forming and developing and hopefully learning how to make good decisions or better decisions than we ever did, of course, is always a huge drive for me. I mean, one of the main reasons I ran for office was because, even our public school system here in New York is so chronically underfunded, and it's out of step with an actual mandate that determines how much funding our schools are supposed to need. So, for example, my district is owed $42 million every year. But nevertheless, I think that making sure that I am carving out that time for myself in the morning has really put a spring in my step. I'm very happy to wake up and get out of bed and, you know, open the window and crack the window open, get some fresh air, and make sure that even though we're not outside necessarily as much as we used to be, that we're getting that vitamin D and because all of that stuff is scientifically critical to actually maintaining our joy. So I think while it's a combination of, yes, cooking and doing the things that we like, it's also important to go out for walks, get that vitamin D, and really kind of figure out what it is that your plan for after all this might be. And hopefully that will spark some inspiration and joy for you to feel excited right now. And with that, I'm actually going to run, if you don't mind, because I have one more thing to do immediately after this. Thank you for having me, Amanda. Very nice to meet all of my colleagues, and good to see my U.S. Senator. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me. Look, I'll, if I may, my parting thought is this. Like I said before, usually we've seen political candidates who are parents in traditional families. I am not, you know, and I still think that much like young parents need a voice in the legislature, divorced parents, you know, can legislate from our lived experiences as well. We know we can represent different challenges of being single parents, or, you know, parents with shared custody, like in my case, and because that is the reality for so many of our children. And in the end, it's all about creating a system that allows them to reach their full potential. So I want to encourage you, even if you might not be a traditional parent in that sense of the word, that you still have value, that your voice still matters, and that you still should run for office. So thank you again, Amanda, for everything that you do to keep us progressive and keep us fighting for more power across the country. I wish everybody good luck. Bye.
Thanks, Senator Ramos. Representative Shu, I'll go to you if you can unmute while you feed your kid. What's bringing you joy right now?
I think what I've really enjoyed through all of this is just the focus on constituent services throughout this and public service. I think everybody probably knows that being an elected official has a lot of different hats, and it's really easy to get cynical about the political game, you know, when you're at the Capitol and, you know, everybody kind of has their part to play. But now that we're stuck at home, it's all constituent services. And so I've been able to get people access to their unemployment benefits, and that's been very rewarding. Like, we go on a walk every single day, and literally every single day somebody just yells at the door, "Thank you for helping me out. Thank you for what you do." And so that's been really nice. Again, being a Democrat in a red state, there's just a ton of politics all the time in Topeka, and people behind closed doors will tell you that they're with you, but then they can't vote that way, and it gets very cynical. But the public service aspect reminds you why you do all this, and it's been great. And also this thing.
Oh my God, her little cheeks. Oh, I love her. Representative Raymond?
Yeah, she's the best. I put over here in the chat, what are Baby Astra's hair care tips? That head of hair is amazing. So bringing me joy, my little girl started laughing this week. She's 14 weeks old and asleep, but there's nothing better than a baby laugh. Also, Kentucky has led the way in our coronavirus response. It's been extremely successful at saving lives. And so, you know, we weren't forced to do anything, and that coming together has, I think, restored a lot of people's faith that despite political differences, we do care about our neighbors and our neighbors care about us. And then I'm actually really looking forward to the fall elections. I mentioned I'm unopposed, so I'm helping friends whose elections have been pushed back a couple of months. So, you know, they are out of money and freaking out. So we're just going to build it back up. But I'm very, very hopeful about so many of our fall elections. And when it's safe to travel again, I hope you'll all come to Kentucky and help us beat Mitch McConnell.
Incredible. Senator Gillibrand, what's making you happy?
Hold on, I'll open the Q&A. So I've been really inspired two ways. First, our first responders are just, every day I'm amazed at how selfless our workers are, our critical workers, and that's been inspiring me and giving me hope, as well as a determination to keep fighting for them and fighting for all that they've done to keep our community safe. I've also been deeply inspired and somewhat joyous about our candidates. I can tell you we've got some incredible candidates running for the U.S. Senate, and I've been helping them through my political action committee, Off the Sidelines, offthesidelines.org. It's been so much fun to watch these men and women strive for these campaigns to become senators who might be in red and purple states where we haven't won a Senate seat. Kansas, for example. We have a woman named Barbara Bollier running in Kansas right now, and I think she's going to win. She was a former Republican, state legislature, just became a Democrat, a doctor, understands how this healthcare crisis is affecting families intimately. She's so good, and so I think she's going to win. I think candidates like Teresa Greenfield in Iowa and Sarah Gideon in Maine, MJ Hager in Texas, Amy McGrath in Kentucky. You know, these aren't easy states, but I think they can all win. And so again, no, I'm good, honey, thank you. I asked my son half an hour ago for a glass of water, and of course he did not hear. He just asked me if I still needed it. I texted him. I got it myself. Anyway, so I'm getting great joy from watching these candidates survive and thrive despite the challenges. They're raising money online. We're doing Zoom events just like this. Our online fundraising is working. So to the extent anybody on this call feels inspired to run, please run. If you feel inspired to help someone who's running, please help someone who's running. And there's lots of ways to do it. You can go straight to their campaign websites, send them $5. You can be cyber surrogates, amplify their message if they tweet about paid leave, retweet it for them. Be a defender if they're getting criticized because they support paid leave, punch back for anybody who's criticizing them. Anything that makes you feel engaged is useful to these candidates through advocacy, through technology, through their platforms. But when we get closer to the election, you also can start phone banking for them, because one thing we can do remotely instead of knocking on doors is make phone calls for them. So please stay engaged, please stay active. These candidates are inspiring and worth it. And when we flip the U.S. Senate and hold the U.S. House, we will be able to govern and pass paid leave finally, pass universal sick days, pass affordable daycare, pass universal pre-K, all these things that would allow more parents to be successful in whatever they're doing for their families and whatever careers they're in. That's why we need to elect them now. So I'm excited about the candidates, and watching them grow as candidates does bring me joy. And defeating Mitch McConnell will bring me great joy. So let's flip the Senate and retake this country. And of course, flipping the White House matters too. So helping Vice President Biden's been very fun, and I'm doing events this week. I did events last week, and I'm going to keep doing them because we do need to replace Trump, and there's no better example than how he dealt with COVID and why we need a new president. So thank you guys for participating. It's been a joy to be on the call.
Thank all of you, and thank you, Astra, for joining too. Oh, I can't get over her. I am so grateful to all of you for joining us. Really honest and candid conversation. It really means a lot. Thank you to the folks who joined from home. It's a hair after 2 o'clock on the East Coast, so we're gonna let folks go, but thank you. If you are feeling inspired by what you listened to today, runforsomething.net/build is where you go to contribute. $5, $10, 500, 10,000, whatever you got, we'll take it. It really does mean a lot to help us support the kind of candidates that Senator Gillibrand mentioned, like Representatives Raymond and Shu. Those are the folks that give me joy, and having these kinds of conversations is what makes this worth it. So thank you all, and have a really good rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Amanda. Great call. Thank you. God bless everybody.
Bye.
Stay safe.